Thank you, Robert. And we're now going to have a discussion on how cloud and drawing automation are transforming the CAD industry. And we have assembled a panel of experts from developer side and also an honored user. Robert's going to be joining us with Altaf Ganehar, who's CEO and founder of Snaptrude. We've got Hartmut Friedman, who you've seen before, who's our Lanis Reply with the CAFM solution. And I'd like to welcome from New York, Greg Schleusner, AIA, who is Principal Director of Design Technology at HOK. He's responsible for managing the firm's software development efforts and implementing new technology solutions, as well as partnering with collaboratively minded partners to solve some of the challenges in AEC. I've known Greg for a considerable period of time, and I'd like to say that possibly 6 years ago, I was having a discussion with Greg about how we needed a new BIM solution, and Greg said, "No, we need drawing automation." And I have to say, ever since that point, he's been a key part in pressurizing software developers to try and address this problem, which is actually, uh, if it works, is going to be a huge benefit for the industry. So I'd like to welcome Greg, Altaf, Robert, and Hartmut. So I'd like to first start off with Greg, starting off with our idea of 6 years ago discussing why automation is important to the AEC industry.
Well, thanks for the intro and thanks for having me today. To the question, I think the biggest challenge, biggest opportunity, and why I 6 years ago, well, time flies. Uh, I, I I identified this and think it's still the most important thing is we've spent years, at least in the BIM world, developing models, but not having very much time to focus on them. I think drawing automation is actually the way you unlock that opportunity to spend more time on modeling and detail and all the other related data sets that need to link to those assets. And um, it's not the end game, but it's an enabler for the end game, and I think that's why it's so important.
And drawing automation, we've had several conversations about, but you've got on record as saying that it's millions of dollars that could be saved for HOK if you deployed some kind of automation.
Yeah, I think that it's old numbers because I haven't redone the math, but super conservative numbers would be we at least waste $18 million a year on certain kinds of very automatable drawing tasks.
Excellent. And I'd like to talk to Altaf now, who's been kind of working on both problems, I guess, because you've been addressing the BIM market as well as also the drawings market. And now by partnering with Greybit, you've enabled a kind of modeling to automation drawing section. So can you explain your journey?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. As you know, and even Greg mentioned, the industry is seeing a transformation. Like while it was for a very long time stuck in the past with the 90s technology, as we pave the way for more connected ecosystem, and the advent of AI is upon us. I just read this really great quote that AI should be doing our dishes, not doing the creative task. And I think like drawing automation falls really into that category. And At the end of the day, all designers really appreciate solving problems and let them solve the problems and let the automation uh, create all of those deliverables in a accelerated manner. And that definitely directly leads to not just cost saving, but also like improved productivity of all of the designers who are trying to take decisions because their intention is to deliver a better design. And the more they focus on that, the better outcomes it will be for not just for the company they're working, but also for the industry in general. And that was our intention. Like since day one, it's an arduous task to go after rebuilding the old stack. We've already spent close to like now it's been 7 years in trying to do that, and we are still largely focused on the design and the modeling side of things. And this partnership definitely made a lot of sense for us to accelerate a solution for the market rather than just like siloed systems which anyway already existed. So I think this connection not just helps us focus a lot more on the modeling and the design and the problem solving aspect. Also, it enables the users to leverage the automation to get to their outcomes within an integrated ecosystem, and that's why this partnership made a lot of sense for us. And super excited to have worked with Robert over the last like maybe year and a half in getting this going.
And obviously, one of the important parts of Snapstream is it's a cloud-based BIM solution. So, do you see the industry as adopting cloud over desktop in the future? At the moment, what's the kind of trajectory of cloud usage for design and automation?
Like any cycle of new technology, it's the innovators and the early adopters who jump in first. And I think we are very much still in the early adopter phase of cloud as an authoring tool. But I think in other places, especially collaboration, coordination, we would have crossed the chasm, so to say, from the book. I forgot the name of the book, but like the old one.
I think it's called Crossing the Chasm.
Yeah.
Yep. And if I want to
So
add something, I think it's actually the probably CAD and our type of authoring is one of the last places that are so desktop focused, right? And I think all the benefits that people see in other verticals around collaboration, data management, I think they shake their heads at sort of in some ways how slow our industry is adopting. I think our solution, other solutions are leading the way, right?
I think Harvard's demonstration with CAFM, I mean, facilities management is decades and decades old. And so all of the work's been done in creating the drawings, but the actual way you consume the drawing is the thing that's changed. So you get to leverage decades of work where CAFM hasn't really needed to change. And now it's the way you deliver it.
Right. Well, let's say I'm just really pleased to see the solution of Robert because I think concerning the automation and what you asked Altaf in direct to the cloud, I think like Salesforce is from the beginning on in the cloud, and so we just looked for having some part not that has the CAD also in the cloud, and so we got it, and it's really was a hard stuff to do. And as you're talking about, like I'm in the business of facility management, well, I think 25 to 30 years, and then there's the BIM. It's coming and coming, and now I think it's really coming. You know? And together with the solution from Robot, I think about automation. Look at if we are doing a moving, yeah. And then the plans are coming automatically. Then you have to check, is there a difference? Maybe rooms, maybe updates on inventory. And then I think I talked about the next level of CAD. And I think in this case, we can talk about the next level of AI also, of automation, because like maybe in Salesforce, the next step is the agent force, like that it's an intelligent agent running in behind, and this guy could maybe work together with the automation, say, okay, come on, import the plan, check it up together with the old plan, then maybe like we have in one of our customers, a big savings bank, that have only some special inventory in some special floor. So then this guy can check and translate for us to say, no, this plan can't be imported. And I think in this case, automation is a very good thing to leverage also the quality.
So technically, you couldn't do this if you weren't on the cloud, because how would you have integrated SAP into your existing product otherwise, or vice versa?
Yeah. Okay. So this is another side. Like integrating, it's not always only Salesforce speaking. I know. And if you're together in this CAD, most of the clients are having SAP or another, maybe Navision, whatever. And we have to have some APIs. Most of the customers are looking for not having too much of one-to-one interfaces. So like if it's MuleSoft or some other integration platform, we have to use, I think, in Salesforce, we call it data cloud, but you can call it whatever you want. We have to share all the data together in maybe in one platform, best case, or in less platforms with a thing like MuleSoft that is managing automatically again the flow of the data.
So just go back to from a user's perspective, Greg, I mean, we seem to be kind of entering a land of automation where it's not just behind the scenes, but you can also batch process your drawings to get hopefully automated drawings out. We're now to Harmon brought out the idea of having agents. We had another discussion about that earlier with AC Magazine. How does a practice control the automation capabilities that are coming?
I think this is the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge. I think up until this time, and it's actually very prescient, the sort of discussions that data drawing really can start to become data because of this cloud access thing, where historically that's a very hard thing. And so I think when we, from a practice perspective, if it's it's not necessarily the end state, but the cloud enables us to actually put workflows together that are fully automatic and can be set in place without having all kinds of manual intervention, which is not the case today. So this idea that we can do two things: one, enable sort of dynamic connection between platforms, but then put them in place in such a way that it scales and they become a data source for all kinds of other use cases, I think is the most important aspect of why this particular kind of automation is really important. We've been able to do some kinds of these automations for a long time, but they don't really integrate very well without these other connections.
And openness, I guess, is fine.
Sorry if I just add one more thing to what Greg is saying. I think it's also important that we're sort of atomizing all this, right? We don't want to be running automations inside a desktop application, right? Because that again ties it to a specific computer with specific access and has all these, old legacy problems, right? And so for us, that still works, right? I would say the whole, AutoCAD or ARIS vertical product solution in a way is all about productivity and automating certain design suggestions. But I think specifically for drawing creation or drawing manipulation, moving that into the cloud or moving that out of a dedicated authoring system, I think gives us many more opportunities to interact with different industries like Salesforce and what they're doing, but also, as Greg mentioned before, just really put that as a part of a bigger workflow and not just, okay, let's automate the drawing production of that floor, right?
And just to add to that last point, one of the things that Hartmut mentioned is this idea that, you put he used the word data cloud, people might use data lake, lakehouse, all these sort of common terms these days. It opens up all kinds of other opportunities to say something like, well, actually the room information, it doesn't come from the drawing, it comes from some other source, but when you make the drawing, you put them together. And clearly this is what's happening in the CAFM sort of demonstrations you're showing, but this would be a novel thing for the AEC industry on the production side to think, well, no, it's actually coming from just the source. And that's a substantial change that I think, given the amount of different kinds of information that goes into a set of automated drawings or drawings in general, it gives us huge opportunities to think about using best tools to bring it into one place when you make it instead of storing it there.
Yeah, and one final comment on that is that I think one of the experience we've had working with Altaf and other companies is that now for the first time, it actually matters what you put in the model, right? And if you had a mistake in the model, previously you just fix it in a drawing, right? And now we're saying, well, to really leverage this, we want to make that drawing a derivative of a other model. And so it actually pays for you to think about, okay, what property data do I actually have in the model? Is the geometry actually correct? And that has been sort of an iterative process we've been going through with Altaf and others.
I'm sure Altaf has something to say about what he's discovered by looking through very, very many RVTs to try and work out what customers are doing with their model creation.
Yeah, like architecture generally is an industry of precision, right? Like all of the mistakes which you do upfront cascade later on. And we all know how that goes in terms of the productivity and the business outcomes. And I think that's what we discovered over the last 1 year. Every junction how it's represented, how the data tagged to it flows downstream, and of course upstream, because no drawing is final. You have to do design changes, value engineering, and all sorts of things. And all of those have to reflect back into your drawings. So maintaining what we call as data sanctity, both in terms of the geometry as well as the associated metadata, becomes extremely crucial. And I think this is where cloud plays an extremely important role. And Greg kind of added to this with the aspect of data lakes, or like the database aspect, where if you have historical data which is pulled in, say, for like programs and spaces and rooms, and how the details of those have already been done exist, you could actually leverage that in a cloud ecosystem and accelerate that entire process. So you could have like a very simplistic representation of a space going to a very detailed representation, which automatically gets converted into a drawing using this automation. And when you change that representation, all the downstream things can just get triggered. And I think we're going to see this happen very soon with all of these technologies coming together, and pretty excited, honestly, for the space.
It's interesting, Greg, because you handled tech stack, which over many years has changed. Items disappear and are replaced, and now suddenly, as a manager of IT, you've got stuff which is maybe in-house. You've got stuff which is supplied to you as a service, and so your information is kind of spread out and multiplied in many different places. So how do you kind of integrate cloud tech stack components into HOK's day-to-day work?
Well, a term that I don't think I'd ever caught myself saying 2 years ago is like governance and these sort of things, but these are actually very important parts of this discussion. Certainly there's a lot of products out there. Excuse me.
Mm.
Certainly there's a lot of products out there that are doing this, but the idea of that being part of a glue that stitches this information together, it's an unfortunate aspect, but the amount of information security and effort we're putting on top of these things to stitch them together is the, I wouldn't call it the downside, but it's an important part of this. But I think the discoverability and the automated connectivity outweighs that. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more effort on hiding this complexity from staff, and at the same time looking for other platforms that have these native integrations. Like, maybe what you'd call your CDE needs to have these connections directly, so you don't have to bother with them and manage the data connections, those sort of things.
Yeah. And I guess for CAFM, where it's the other end, where you have many consumers who some don't have technical capabilities anyway. So it's about offering the most simple form that's intelligible to those users.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you've seen in my video, we call it expert view. So you have only the view on that what you're doing. Maybe you have the head of I'm the cleansing man. So then you see the room type, and you see the floor covering, things like this, and where the data is coming from. It's really not important for you. You are working on the data, and like the CAD is only the viewing and editing tool of data. So you say, okay, this is a chair of company X. So I have a table, I have maybe a cost center, and I have the person sitting on this table. And maybe they are coming from 5 different systems, but the user is not interested. I'm just working on it. Just, let's say, move me from room A to room B, and room B is another cost center, and in the end, it's getting to SAP. And I think this is very nice and charming to have this, like you say. It's not really important for the guy who is working on it. He is only want to do perfectly his processes.
Mm-hmm. And Robert, you're obviously caught in the middle with a number of different kind of companies that you serve. On one hand, you've got Snaptrude, who are kind of BIM to producing documentation to automation. Obviously, we've got CAFM, which is very much the drawings are done. How can we simplify and provide those for greater distribution? And you're talking with Greg at the same point. He's saying, faster, pussycat. We want more capabilities as soon as possible. The more the more you can do in sort of producing drawings, the better.
Yeah, so I think what's important to us is that we focus on a specific set of problems, right? And we've said, for one, we want to enable companies that find value in having a drawing available in a browser and being able to operate on those, right? And as Hakan says, sometimes that's really very light, something very slightly above viewing. But we are already currently discussing how do we make some expert users actually give the ability to move a wall, right? To do more things that maybe viewing can't do for you. At the same time, we realize we are not, alone in the world, right? We are part of a connected ecosystem, and so when you look at the set of sort of tasks we put in that automation system, it's mostly about importing existing data, turning them into drawings, taking another format of a drawing into another format, extracting data out of a drawing. Like, we see ourselves as being one piece of a larger process or ecosystem, right? And we think that having concentrated on that allows us to deliver this at the required quality, but also keep making progress fast enough that it actually makes a difference.
The interesting thing is that this is obviously you support many different ways of actually developing and changing this for end users. So I know, Greg, you've got the ability to program and do your own modifications if you wanted to. But do you see this as the kind of product as something that you will build your own scripts on, your own automations on?
Yeah, so two things are true. One, we could do our own customization, but it's much easier to customize on people's platforms than doing everything yourself, which tends not to scale. Especially, this is a data problem. People make very good proof of concepts that don't scale. So scaling is important here. And actually, like Robert mentioned, different use cases. One use case that was thinking about sending an email, but knowing this presentation is coming, figured we'd talk about after it. But we've sort of determined a workflow that we could harvest all the room information coming out of our PDFs into a database that we probably couldn't do at all, but it's a workflow that we'd probably want to put in place. And, in 2-3 weeks time, we could start collecting every project, every week. That kind of, it's a novel collection of tools. Just like Robert said, you have to sit in an ecosystem. Like, these PDFs aren't going to come from their platform, but being able to ingest them. But I think that's the kind of benefit of thinking about this kind of platform. It's not, at least from my perspective, not an end user problem. It's a scale problem. And we have to solve both. But if I can, do something that would have taken years to collect this data previously in a matter of weeks, it's obviously worth it. But it's just indicative of the capabilities when you stitch this data together and look at it as a toolkit, not a solution.
There's many things we just couldn't do before, right? Just think about the idea. I'm going to load on my desktop CAD system every single project I've done the last 15 years, and I'm going to extract all room data. Just wouldn't do it, right? And so now we're finally able to think a little bit out of the box of that sort of, I'm only interested in serving the author of what I was going to be working with my CAD tool. How can I serve the rest of the organization? That's what's exciting to us. Like, we followed this view 15 years ago when we started offering mobile apps to so people could take existing plans out on the construction site, right? We found companies where that usage outstripped the desktop usage by far, right? And we're just going the next step, saying, well, what else would you like to be able to do? And very often that's not give me another CAD feature in the desktop CAD, but allow me to solve other problems.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about Altaf with your kind of new BIM application, the ability where you've integrated areas, drawings into your tool. Are you going to allow your customers to also access the development tools so they can also do their own automations and scripting for how they want the output from your system?
Yeah, that's very much actually on the card since we've been developing Snaptool. Like, we always wanted it to be API first. Just the timing of when we shipped that part was something which we had to roadmap on. But finally, we have slotted it in. very soon we are actually exposing all the APIs, which is not just on the design side, but also like on the data collection, data manipulation, like almost like at the similar to like what a data warehouse example which Greg gave. So we are trying to expose all of these capabilities, and because of the integration, it would make a lot more sense to make the automation intelligent using this data. And interoperability plays a huge role in getting the data into a central location.
and
I also
offering
want to add,
configurations.
sorry, Martin, very briefly, I want to add that, for example, what I see the value that a partner like Subtrut brings is that they know exactly what users they have. They know exactly what kind of needs those users have. And so to me, one of the values they bring is they actually simplify some of the complexity of choice we have, right? That Greg said, I can, as a sophisticated, large organization, I am able to string these things together and make a great solution out of it. But not all, companies are the same, right? And so specifically, we think that, Snapshot can bring the power of this platform, actually probably not by making it fully exposed to their users, but to really hone in on a set of customizations that make sense for their users. And how far they go, that's a product choice that Snapshot can make.
Yes.
One thing I was thinking about asking was Greg, obviously there's a potential changeover of software in the industry. Obviously Revit's kind of not going to get redesigned as a desktop form. Obviously AutoCAD is decades old as well. So are companies like HOK looking at their tech stacks and looking at their tools and thinking about how you change your product mix in the future based on cloud?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the cloud part is becoming more part of the decision-making process, but that's being made for us because most people are building cloud first. I think that the last point from Altaf and Robert is pretty important because I don't foresee a future where we're replacing tools. I think we're adding more and wanting them to work better together. So I can imagine a scenario where we're actually using Altaf Snaptrude tools with other platforms, and actually we want to assemble a set of drawings from those, and then indeed interject some data sources from a third or fifth or 10th sort of piece. So I think that's the way we think we need to make sure we're positioning ourselves is make sure the data isn't stuck somewhere so you can't put it together, and then to Robert's point, that has to be simplified. And so having the partners that take on that work but follow the pattern, that's the piece that we need to, like myself and others that I collaborate with, that's the thing we need to work on, is make sure people understand what that pattern needs to look like.
So it's kind of data alchemy.
Yeah, it's just late coming to our industry. It's not new to anybody else.
Interesting. So looking at the technology and the SDKs and everything we've seen today, how much, Robert, of the kind of like DWG functionality is currently in the cloud application versus the desktop application versus the other version? What kind of capabilities are missing? Is it now fully featured, or are we?
But we are making some choices about what capabilities are not there yet today. I can give you a couple of examples. For example, we currently have no solid modeling in the cloud version. We did bring constraints recently, but those are not, there's no fundamental reason why we cannot have those. It's just we are finding our use cases to be a little more 2D heavy, I would say, in the browser right now. There's some work around sheet sets that it doesn't exist today, but that's TBD. But yeah, we're listening to our customers and users, right? We've added a bunch of workflows in the last 12 months that is part of our sort of end user presentation we just showed. But yeah, if partners say we really want to be able to have this workflow make sense for us, and we're more than happy to bring that over. And the way we've architected our system is that this is not a big lift. right? It's something that we can respond to pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up our session. So I'd like to thank Hartmut, Roberts, Greg, and Altaf for taking part. And I hope you've enjoyed the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.